Hi there, my name's Rosa Dawn, and today I'm going to be talking about a term adored by gender radicals, one that's often used as an attempt to shut down discussion, and it's been thrown at me and others like me countless times. Give it up, gonna be alright. If you've ever encountered a discussion on transsexual issues online, whether it's through Twitter or the enlightened world of Tumblr, you've no doubt come across the phrase Truscum. Whether it's being called a gatekeeper or combined with a whole host of delightful insults, Truscum is often used to describe trans people who disagree with the rhetoric used by gender radicals, and has been thrown at almost every trans person who is critical of the multi-gender movement, including Blair White, Tranime Girl, and even myself. But what does the label actually mean? In simple terms, Truscum, or transmed, which is a friendlier term, means acknowledging that being transsexual is to have gender dysphoria, and that undergoing, or planning to undergo, treatments to transition allows you to use that label. There would be an exception here for someone who can't transition due to medical reasons, however. So it also means recognising that an effort needs to be made to pass as the gender you identify with. For example, Truscum will be critical of a hulking, balding male with a splendid beard if they were to say they're actually a woman, and you should refer to them as a woman despite the excessive facial hair. Finally, there's scepticism of there being multiple genders. If you disagree with trigender, demi-boy, moongender and so on, you'll probably be labelled Truscum. In short, the true part of Truscum refers to believing that to be transsexual means to fit certain criteria. And the scum part? Well...
obviously, it's in the name, you're scum. You should know it.
So we're scum for having a different opinion. And interestingly enough, the term gender radicals have given themselves in this debate is too cute, which is just embarrassing. So I've outlined the key tenets of being Truscum, and whilst it's not the nicest phrasing in the world, I'm going to own this slur. So I'll be using it to refer to myself from here on out. I'm sure many of you watching would agree this criteria is actually quite reasonable and not scummy in the slightest. But there are many accusations levelled at Truscum which aren't true and misrepresent our position. I'm going to run through some of the more common, spiteful and downright strange offences Truscum are supposedly guilty of. One of these is to believe there is one true way to transition. Critics of Truscum would argue we only see one particular route when it comes to transitioning, and those who go off the beaten path and do it in their own way wouldn't be seen as transsexual by us. This could not be further from the truth. Transitioning is a lengthy and complex process, to which there is no one-size-fits-all model that could possibly be applied. To put this in context, my transition looked like as follows. I came out to my friends, I started living part-time, I managed to get on the NHS system, I then told my parents, I then went full-time as a woman, and finally I received my hormones before getting gender reassignment surgery a few years later. My approach wasn't the most novel, but with little advice to go off that wasn't from a patronising hug box, it felt natural to do at the time. But there's many people who would do things in a different order, or even skip out certain parts. Some people might opt to jump headfirst full time. Others might only come out once they've secured medical access. But the shared goal is the same, and that's what's important. It doesn't matter how you get there, but so long as your endpoint is to live as the gender you identify as, permanently, it doesn't matter how you transition, so long as you do it. There's also the accusation of internalized transphobia, that we have a deep-seated hatred for ourselves and others like us, so we want to bring down trans people in general. After all, only believing there are two genders is apparently the most transphobic one can get. Such accusations are made with little to no evidence, and as such I could easily disprove it just by saying no. But again, the claim is inaccurate. We recognise the harm the gender radical mantra is doing and continues to do, and as such, we use our position to speak out. When gender radicals criticise transsexualism being labelled as a medical condition, we understand by doing this it could affect medical access for us and others like us. The idea of internalized transphobia goes hand in hand with another common belief, that we seek to appease non-transsexual or cis people. I've always found the idea of being labelled self-hating for breaking away from party thought as grossly offensive. We see it when black people critical of the Black Lives Matter movement are called Uncle Tom or other racial slurs. So this isn't a phenomenon unique to gender radicals. but systematic of identity politics as a whole. I'm an individual that came to my conclusions on my own, without being told what to think by either gender radicals or gender critical feminists, or anyone in the middle that doesn't care either way. I've based my viewpoint on my own experience, and I encourage everyone to question movements that label those they claim to represent but don't follow their beliefs as heretics. History is filled with sinister examples of this line of thought. A phrase you'll often hear alongside Truscum is gatekeeper. This essentially means that, as Truscum, we understand that a word has a very particular meaning, and that by opening that meaning to essentially mean everyone, dilutes it to the point of redundancy. This is the one point I'll concede, but it's one I'm happy to do so. Being a transsexual isn't meant to be a part of a club. It's a descriptor as to who you are, with set criteria to meet that definition. I'm sorry to anyone that doesn't have gender dysphoria but was born female, looks female, has a female name, but uses some of the most imaginative pronouns you've ever heard. You may be genderqueer, but you aren't a tranny. And that's not a bad thing. Embrace who you are. Just don't co-opt our label when you already have one that fits you. There are some accusations thrown at Truscum that border on slanderous, however. Phrases such as ableist, classist, racist, and sexist are often used in abandon. The idea that Truscum are ableist appears to come from the assumption that someone wouldn't be considered trans if they weren't able to physically transition due to a medical condition, or if they needed to stop treatment for any reason. This is technically incorrect. As I mentioned earlier, there are people who cannot transition due to health reasons. They might not be able to take testosterone or estrogen supplements, or the surgeries might not be possible for a multitude of reasons. This doesn't stop them from being transsexual, but it still means some effort needs to be made in transitioning. There is certainly an extra level of difficulty in passing here which nobody can deny, but to be transsexual isn't easy at the best of times, and unfortunately it is an extra hurdle that they'll need to overcome. The use of classist against Truscum is interesting, however. I say this because class is often ignored in the realm of identity politics, despite someone's class affecting every aspect of their life, mainly because those who partake in this debate are often middle to upper class themselves, so to admit class can grant privileges would be shooting themselves in the foot. But using labels such as racist and sexist are particularly ignorant, especially as there's no clear argument as to why these words should be used in the first place. This is a systematic problem at the far left. Phrases such as racist have a clear definition and are now being used as insults rather than a descriptor for something that's truly abhorrent. By using it in this way, the term becomes diluted and loses its true meaning, in the same way that describing people who are conservative or centrist as alt-right does. The ideology of far-left politics has poisoned the well of discourse, and it only continues to spread. Finally, I've seen gender radicals accuse Truscum of being violent. The definition of violence seems to vary from person to person. In an article entitled "Why Aren't More People Denouncing Truscum?", the author indicates that Truscum opinions amount to violence. He describes being told he was faking being trans by saying, "I hadn't known up until that point that there were actually trans people that thrived on being violent towards other trans people. I didn't think a transgender person would ever intentionally misgender, harass, and silence other trans people. But they're real, they're out there, and every so often they pitch a fit on social media, hurling violent language in my direction." I can completely understand why he would be upset at the comment, but to consider it as violence is dishonest and misleading. To have a disagreement is not the same as physical violence. Other gender radicals will go a step further and accuse Truscum of being prone to actual physical violence, as shown in this particular loaded comment.
Make sure you're in a physically safe environment if you are choosing to stay around these people, because sometimes they can get violent, as with every other person in the world.
I've not seen any instances of physical violence between Truscum and gender radicals. I have, however, seen many comments from gender radicals which appear to condone violence being used against their opponents, ranging from dropkicks to being set on fire. I understand that Twitter can be a very heated environment, but it doesn't excuse such comments. I am aware that gender radicals say they are often harassed by Truscum. I've been in such conversations where people have made those kinds of accusations. I don't condone targeting individuals and harassing them for holding a different belief. but it's also important to point out that holding a different opinion and engaging in discussion is not harassment. I've no doubt there are vindictive people on both sides, but let's try to keep it as civil and honest as possible. So what are your thoughts on Truscum? Do you think our positions are reasonable? Or are we really scum that are beyond saving? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry it took so long to get this video out, as I've been fairly busy over the last few weeks, what with going to China followed by having surgery, but I am going to be uploading more frequently from now on, so if you want to keep up to date, please like, subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.